He leaned into the microphone, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. "I want to thank him," the president said, his voice calm, but sharp as glass. He thought he was lighting a fire, but all he did was give us the cover of smoke we needed. Before we begin, what's one moment where you realized a situation wasn't at all what it seemed on the surface? Let us know in the comments. The television screen glowed in the darkened studio, casting a stark blue light on the face of the man who commanded the attention of millions every night. Tucker Carlson stared into the camera, his expression a carefully crafted mask of earnest concern. For 4 consecutive nights, he had been building his case, piece by painstaking piece. His voice, a familiar cadence of righteous indignation, echoed in living rooms across the nation. "They're not telling you the truth," he said, leaning forward as if sharing a secret with a dear friend. "The people you trust, the man you voted for, are being led by the nose into a war that will cost the lives of our sons and daughters. I have it on the highest authority, from patriots inside the administration who are terrified of what they're seeing, that the drums of war are beating. And the president, the one who promised to put America first, is now just a puppet for the generals." Behind him, a fiery graphic of a map of Iran pulsed ominously. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Betrayal? Trump's secret push for war." He wasn't just reporting, he was crafting a narrative. He spoke of troop movements that were only whispers, of diplomatic cables he claimed to have seen, of a change in the president's demeanor behind closed doors. He painted a picture of a leader who had abandoned his principles, seduced by the military-industrial complex he had once vowed to dismantle. The story was simple, powerful, and deeply frightening to the millions who had placed their faith in President Donald Trump. And with each broadcast, the pressure mounted. The phones in the White House had been ringing off the hook. The media, smelling blood in the water, had amplified Carlson's message until it was an all-consuming roar. That very morning, inside the quiet sanctum of the Oval Office, President Trump looked out over the Rose Garden, the early light casting long shadows across the lawn. The distant sound of the city waking up was a stark contrast to the storm raging on the airwaves and online. On the polished mahogany of the resolute desk lay a stack of intelligence briefings, but his mind was elsewhere. His chief of staff, a seasoned political veteran with a perpetually worried brow, cleared his throat. "Mr. President, the latest polls are in. Carlson's narrative is starting to take hold. People are scared. Our own supporters are confused. They think you've abandoned them." The president turned from the window, his face unreadable. He picked up a heavy paperweight, feeling its cool, solid mass in his hand. "He was always a showman," Trump said, his voice quiet. "Loves the ratings, loves the drama." "This is more than drama, sir," the chief of staff pressed. "He's accusing you of treason to your own movement. He's effectively giving our enemies a roadmap to our internal divisions. And the press conference this afternoon, it's going to be a slaughterhouse. Every question will be a variation of why did you lie to us?" President Trump placed the paperweight back on the desk with a soft, definitive thud. "Let them ask," he said, a flicker of something steely in his eyes. Sometimes, the best way to move in the dark is to have someone shining a spotlight in the wrong direction. He walked over to a secure phone line, a direct link to a team of negotiators hidden away in a neutral country, thousands of miles from the political theater of Washington. For weeks, they had been engaged in the most delicate of dances, a secret, high-stakes negotiation with a moderate faction within the Iranian government. It was a long shot, a path to peace that required absolute secrecy and an immense amount of trust. The war talk, the public posturing, the seemingly aggressive stance, it had all been part of a grand, intricate strategy. It was a bluff, designed to provide the Iranian moderates with political cover, allowing them to argue to their own hardliners that negotiating with Trump was the only way to avert an imminent American attack. The president spoke into the receiver, his voice low and firm. "How close are we?" he asked. He listened for a long moment, nodding slowly. "Good. Tell them to hold steady. It's all coming to a head today." He hung up the phone and looked at his chief of staff. "Get the press office ready, and tell them to make sure the cameras are perfectly focused. We wouldn't want anyone to miss the show." Hours later, the James S. Brady press briefing room was packed to the gills. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Every major network was carrying the event live. As President Trump walked to the podium, he was met with a cacophony of shouted questions and the blinding flash of cameras. He stood there for a moment, silently surveying the room, letting the chaos wash over him. He began with a few prepared remarks about the economy, but the reporters were restless. They weren't there for job numbers. They were there for the kill. Finally, a reporter from a major cable network, known for her aggressive style, was called upon. She stood, her voice dripping with accusation. "Mr. President," she began, "for a week, one of your biggest supporters in the media has been telling the American people that you are a, quote, puppet for the generals, and that you have betrayed your America First promise by secretly preparing for a full-scale war with Iran. Your supporters feel lied to. Your critics feel vindicated. What do you say to the millions of Americans who believe you are leading them into another endless war under false pretenses?" The room fell silent. This was the moment. The culmination of a week of relentless attacks. Every camera, every microphone, every eye was fixed on the President of the United States. He took a slow breath and leaned into the microphone, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. "I want to thank him," the President said, his voice calm but sharp as glass. "He thought he was lighting a fire, but all he did was give us the cover of smoke we needed." A confused murmur rippled through the room. The President continued, his voice gaining strength, his tone shifting from that of a politician on defense to a commander explaining his strategy. "For the last several weeks, some of the bravest diplomats this country have been engaged in highly sensitive, back-channel negotiations to de-escalate the situation with Iran and secure our interests without firing a single shot. This was an operation that required absolute secrecy. It required our counterparts in those talks to have plausible deniability. They needed to be able to tell their own people that the threat of American force was real, that it was imminent, and that their only choice was to come to the table." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He looked directly into the main camera, as if speaking not to the reporters, but to the millions watching at home. "You see, that's the art of the deal. You make the person across the table think you're holding a sword when all you want to do is shake their hand. While commentators were screaming, quote, war on television for ratings, we were whispering peace in quiet rooms halfway across the world. The loud, angry, and frankly reckless speculation provided the perfect distraction. It created the very pressure we needed to bring about a diplomatic solution. So yes, let this be a lesson. Don't always believe the loudest voice in the room." The room was stunned into silence. The reporters, who had come prepared for a fight, were left speechless, their pre-written questions and attack lines instantly obsolete. They had been so focused on the drama manufactured on a television set that they had completely missed the real story. In a single masterful stroke, the President had not only defended his position but had reframed the entire narrative. He was not the puppet. He was the puppet master. In the green room of his television studio, Tucker Carlson watched the press conference on a large monitor, his face ashen. The smug confidence he had worn like armor for a week had evaporated, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. The patriots he had cited, his impeccable sources, were now exposed as either low-level staffers who had misinterpreted military posturing or, worse, pawns in a game they didn't understand. His entire narrative, built on a foundation of supposed insider knowledge, had been demolished in less than 5 minutes. He, Tucker Carlson, the self-proclaimed tribune of the people, had been used. His arrogance, his belief that he knew the President's mind better than the President himself, had made him a fool. He had nearly sabotaged a critical national security operation not out of malice, but out of a hubris so profound he couldn't see past the glow of his own studio lights. 2 days later, the official announcement came from the White House. A landmark preliminary agreement had been reached. It would halt Iran's nuclear enrichment program in exchange for a lifting of certain sanctions, and it would establish a framework for verifiable weapons inspections. Leaders from around the world praised the unexpected diplomatic breakthrough. The very news outlets that had been predicting war were now running headlines like, "Trump's unorthodox diplomacy averts crisis," and "The Gambler's Peace." That evening, President Trump sat alone in the Oval Office once more. The roar of the news cycle had become a respectful hum. He had taken an incredible risk. trusting his own instincts over the cacophony of his critics and even his allies. He knew that true strength wasn't always about showing force. Sometimes, it was about having the intelligence to play the long game and the courage to withstand the fire while a greater victory was being forged in silence. And in that quiet moment of triumph, the only rating that mattered was peace. What did you think of the president's move in the press conference? Was it a stroke of genius or an incredible risk? Let us know your thoughts below. For more stories about strategy, leadership, and the moments that define history, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.